Hello, welcome back to another recap video of our discipleship group. So last week we covered the first half of A Vision for Missionary Discipleship, Win, Build, Send. It's article 5.0 if you're following along in the Making Missionary Foundations for Discipleship book. So we start off hearing about a story of Peter and Francis, who were roommates in college in the early 1500s. And as the story goes on, they're then introduced to another roommate named Ignatius. And so the story goes on to just talk about how Ignatius, which we learn is Ignatius of Loyola, how he had an influence on Peter and Francis's lives, and how Peter had wanted to discern a lifestyle of either a priesthood or fatherhood, having a stable career. But Francis was looking for luxury, nobility, comfort. And so then Ignatius comes into this friendship and is living a drastically different life. He just had a conversion. If you don't know, he has a very interesting story about how he was hit with a cannon, and the cannon to the leg caused him to be taken away from battle, and then had a conversion when the only books he could read that were available in his recovery were stories of the saints and stories of Christ. Whereas he had been used to romantic novels or fantasies or different literature that was not of Christ. In his recovery, they only had godly books. So really interesting guy. Please look him up if you don't know much about him. So anyways, St. Ignatius of Loyola goes to college and becomes roommates with Peter and Francis. And through this time, he continues to befriend them. Peter gets all in. He's like, yes, let's do this. Let's give our lives to Christ. And Francis is still not on board. But as we see, Francis eventually gives his life to Christ, and the three of them go on to found the Order of the Society of Jesus, also known as the Jesuits. And these men become St. Francis Xavier, St. Peter Favor, and St. Ignatius of Loyola. So it's a very interesting story. They tell it a lot better than I do, so please go read it. But what it's emphasizing is the method modeled by the master, which is Win, Build, Send. And so I'm going to actually explain this chart. And so Win here is talking about the stage in which you are helping someone to come to Christ. So in the Win stage, it's taking someone from maybe knowing about Jesus to actually knowing Jesus, and making sure that they know who Jesus is. But then the second part of it, which in the graph you can see right here, there's a cross, that is accepting the gospel. And so to go from win into build, one must accept the gospel first. And with that, we talked about at the very beginning of this section, this lesson class thing, you must, to accept the gospel, you need to change your life. Say, yes, Jesus is who I want to follow, and I want to put him at the center of my life, and my life is going to change because I'm going to start living the way Jesus wants me to. So from there, after you've accepted the gospel, you would enter the build phase. And so the build phase is when we are supporting someone in their faith, helping them to learn more, to grow more in their faith. Oftentimes, focus will associate it with Acts 2:42. So again, we talked about that a while ago. This whole article was a great summary of things we've talked about and piecing it all together. So Acts 2:42, which is the teachings of the apostles, sacraments, praying, and fellowship. So those are really big elements of the build phase. And so, it's not just talking about them, it's living them with someone. So inviting someone into a retreat with you, or inviting them to do something, to go to Mass with you. That is part of the build phase. And then we would call it the high call. And so the high call is when you basically tell someone tell someone their duty to live mission, which we all have a baptismal calling to be disciples. and then you invite them to live mission with you. And so the high call to mission is an explicit invitation to participate in the church's mission of evangelization. So that's what it is. So we're all called to be missionary disciples. It looks different for everyone, but the high call is the part where you're asking them, do you want to live mission for the church and for Jesus? And so there are 4 things to look for in a person when you're going to invite them into living mission. So that we say those are fact, F-A-C-T. Are they faithful, available, contagious, and teachable? And now these words don't mean exactly what they mean. And so a faithful person is faithful to Christ, to the teachings of the church. They are faithful in moral authority, another topic we've covered. Something else that we used to say is, are they faithful to their commitments? Are they ready to do this? The second is available. And it doesn't mean that this is the person with a ton of time. It means that they're willing to make the time to invest in others and to bring Christ's love to others. And then contagious is someone who radiates the joy of the gospel. It doesn't mean that they are the most bubbly, extroverted person. You could have the quietest introvert who is contagious, but it's when people interact with them, do they want to hear more about the faith? Are they interested? Can they tell this person's living different in a way that they want to live different as well? Is more of what contagious means. So are they drawing people into the church just by their actions and their language? And then teachable is someone willing to learn from others. And so, yeah, we've all been in the situation. It's no fun trying to walk with someone who thinks they know everything. And so if someone is fact, then we usually would give them a high call. And so, yeah. And then the last part of the chart, here it is send. And so with the send, that is when we go on mission. And so we're not just going to throw someone out into the wild, but instead we invite them to go on mission with us. And so it's not just forming others in the faith, but also teaching them to go on mission as well. And so that's what we call the little way of evangelization, is teaching others how to teach others. And that's like a summary of 2 Timothy 2:2, which actually, dang, I don't have it written down. But anyways, look it up, 2 Timothy 2:2. And then our focus phrase is teach teachers to teach. So anyways, it was a pretty content-heavy lesson. We did stop and have some good discussion. Something that I really did love in the win phase, someone noted out, is that there's 2 parts to the win phase. The first is the planting or the sowing of the seeds, and the second is the reaping. And so sometimes one person will go and plant, knowingly or unknowingly, and then another person will come later and might reap the benefits of that sowing. So if someone starts telling someone about Christ, and then you don't see that person for a while, and then 2 years later they show up at a church and someone says, "Why are you here?" And that person says, "Oh, well, 2 years ago, someone told me that in struggles, I should go to church, and I'm here looking for truth and answers." And then that new person can walk with them through the win, the build, and the send phase, reaping what has been sown. So it's not about journeying with someone through the whole time, but instead journeying with people where they're at, and knowing that you may not see someone from win to build to send, but you might only see them for different chunks of what the Lord's inviting you to see. So our questions, I loved these discussion questions, which is why I'm going to include them, was, are you prepared to win, build, and send others? Who in your life needs winning, building, and sending? Are you willing to make the sacrifices necessary to help others grow? And then I added a few of my own. What needs to change if you are not ready to win, build, and send someone? And what are the sacrifices that you need to make in order to be able to live this lifestyle? So thanks for following along with us, and we will be concluding the article tonight. It continues with the 3 habits of missionary disciples. God bless.